Welcome everyone to this year's DataCite community focus topic session titled Enriching the Value of DataCite Metadata. Our presenters are Kelly Stathis, one of our product managers, as well as Maria Gould, Director of Strategic Programs and Partnerships. I'm really happy to see so many familiar faces in the audience, and I'm excited to hear how deeply the story of DataCite is intertwined with metadata. And so, Maria, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone who's joining today. We're really excited to have you all here, and we're really excited to dive into this topic. So the plan for today's session, we're going to start off with a little bit of framing about what do we mean when we talk about DataCite metadata? What does DataCite metadata mean in the context of DataCite? Then I'm going to hand over to Kelly to take everybody on a really exciting deep dive into the DataCite metadata journey. Then we'll close with some information and reflections about what we're working on now and what we want to work on in the future to enrich the value of DataCite metadata. And as Paul mentioned, we have a Q&A box available in the Zoom controls. We'll be doing a little discussion and Q&A at the end. So if you have questions as Kelly and I are talking, please feel free to post them in the Q&A box. We'll get to them as we go along. We'll probably save most of it for the very end, but please post your questions as you think of them. And again, thanks everybody for being here today. So on that note, as part of welcoming everyone, I want to get a sense of what brings you here to this session today and what is interesting or important to you related to this topic of DataCite metadata. So I'm going to ask everyone to take a few minutes to participate in a quick poll on Menti. If you go to menti.com and enter the code that you see on the screen here, or just point your device at the QR code, or there should be a link in the chat as well, you can go ahead and start responding to a couple of quick questions about your use and interest in DataCite metadata. I'm going to switch screens for a minute so that we can see the responses coming in. So the first question that we're asking in this poll is, how would you describe your current relationship to DataCite metadata? And you can pick one or more of the response options here. I'm seeing many come in already. All right, we're seeing a lot of people saying that they register metadata with DataCite. Similarly, that they integrate DataCite metadata into a system. Also, I guess third is analyzing DataCite metadata. But we're seeing some responses in each one of these categories, which is great. For those who are answering something else or it's complicated, we'd love to hear more about what that something else is if you want to share any additional comments in the chat. Okay, we'll keep this question up for another 30 seconds or so to give everyone a chance to respond. This is a nice breakdown that shows many different ways in which our global user community interacts with DataCite metadata, including being a general metadata enthusiast, which we love. All right, so I think we have a critical mass here. We'll move on to the next question. This will be the last one for now. And then we have a couple more questions at the end of the presentation. So in this next question, this is a free text response. You can say whatever you would like. Just share with us what you find valuable about DataCite metadata. Okay, it's great to see some of these initial comments coming in. Seeing a lot of themes around standardization. And it's the ability to describe different resource types. Fitness for purpose is a nice way of putting it. Thank you for all of these comments. We'll keep them coming. Seems to be another theme around usability and consistency. Not too complex. That's a nice comment. We like to have a balance, which we'll talk about in a moment. Right, we'll leave this up for another moment if there are any final comments. Thank you for all of these. This is really great to see. Okay. Thank you again. I'm going to leave this up, but I'm going to go back to the slide presentation for now. You can continue adding comments here as you think of them. And we have a couple more questions that we will ask of you at the end. But it's great to see a really great cross-section here of different things that you all find valuable about DataCite metadata. And this is exactly why we are doing this session today, to talk about what we're doing and what we want to do to make DataCite metadata even more valuable. So the reason why we care about what you think about DataCite metadata, and that we care about enhancing the value of DataCite metadata in general, is that metadata is at the heart of what we do at DataCite. And so it's impossible to talk about DataCite without talking about the metadata that we support in different ways. And so we are a global community as an organization and as an infrastructure provider that brings together all of these research organizations from all around the world who are relying upon DataCite as essential infrastructure to share and to store metadata about their research outputs and activities, to make available for broad discovery and analysis and reuse for different purposes and in different ways. And so we know through the work that we've been doing over the past 16 years and that we continue to do, that one of the core reasons why research organizations rely upon DataCite is that we provide an option for making it possible to store and to share all of this metadata about research and the various activities associated with them. So what's important in the DataCite context is that one of the core services that we offer is DOI registration, but it's not about just putting a DOI on a particular research output or resource. The power of the DataCite DOI's services that we offer is the DataCite metadata that is associated with that DOI that then becomes part of this global research ecosystem. So we know many of you here are very, very familiar with some of these dimensions of our DOI infrastructure and metadata already. We also know that some of you here may be just learning about our metadata schema. So we wanted to take this opportunity to go on a journey with you and take a deep dive into what metadata means at DataCite and how it serves our overarching mission of connecting research and advancing knowledge. So as part of this, what really grounds the work that we do with metadata is the DataCite metadata schema. Many of you noted in the comments that you appreciate the kind of standardization and consistency and usability of DataCite metadata. And all of that really comes down to the schema that we employ that members use to describe their research outputs and to assert different connections and relationships across outputs and activities. And I wanted to just note, as part of high-level framing before I hand over to Kelly, some of the important aspects of the DataCite metadata schema and the key function that it provides for these core use cases. So one thing that I wanted to note is that the schema is specifically designed for all research outputs, resources, and activities. Yes, the name of this organization is DataCite. Yes, the metadata schema does make references to data, but we take a broad interpretation of that notion of data to really encompass all research outputs, resources, and activities that can be described and cited in scholarly workflows and research infrastructure. A second key aspect of the schema related to that is that the reason why it's designed to support a broad range of outputs is that the core focus of the schema is really to drive key use cases around discovery and citation. And so this slide is highlighting some direct language from the schema documentation that talks about an important balance that the schema aims to establish and aims to adhere to in terms of providing a structured and accessible and generalized way of describing research in order to make it possible for research to be discovered and cited. And what's important about this is that DataCite metadata schema is not meant to replace local level or discipline specific or community specific metadata that may be used in an individual repository, for instance. And so the power of the DataCite schema is that it can exist in tandem with that local level metadata to be able to support these core use cases for discovery and citation. So all of the decisions that we make as we're continuing to develop and evolve the schema further are driven by this overarching purpose. A third key point about the DataCite metadata schema, which the experts and enthusiasts here will already be familiar with, is that we have specific guidelines and recommendations in the schema for which components or properties are considered or established as mandatory, and those which might be considered more recommended. And we're constantly trying to work with the community to help them navigate some of those choices and decisions that need to be made about which of the recommended or optional properties should be included when a DOI is being registered, for instance, and also to maximize best practices when it comes to the mandatory properties as well. And Kelly will go a little bit deeper into that topic in a moment. And the last point that I want to make about the schema work that we do at DataCite before handing over to Kelly is that when we're not doing this at DataCite in a vacuum. The DataCite metadata schema is developed actively through and with community input. One of the key ways that we do that is through the metadata working group, which is a group of community experts from around the world who are actively involved in understanding different decisions for the future about new metadata properties or different aspects of the schema as it continues to develop. We also have an open process for community members to submit feedback about the metadata schema and share the kinds of use cases that they want the schema to support for them. So everything that we're doing on the one hand is driven by those core use cases around supporting discovery and citation, and also being developed and informed by community needs and use cases. So that is a brief overview of what DataCite metadata and what the schema means for DataCite. And on that note, I'm happy to hand over to Kelly to take you on a deeper dive.
Sorry, one moment while I get this going here. Okay. So yeah, thanks so much, Maria. So I want to talk about the impact of DataCite metadata. And to show this, I'm going to talk about how DataCite metadata is created, processed, and reused, and how this plays a critical role in global research infrastructure. So let's get to it. So when we talk about DataCite metadata, we're often focusing on this DataCite metadata store. And this is the metadata that DataCite has for over 105 million DOIs. The DataCite metadata store is at the heart of everything we do at DataCite. However, this journey begins with research organizations who register DOIs with DataCite and share their metadata with us. Some examples of the types of sources here include data repositories, institutional repositories, and preprint servers. And when this metadata is shared with us, we store and process the metadata. This makes it possible for research organizations to reuse the metadata through harvesting, to power discovery services, research information systems, national catalogs, and more that rely on DataCite for a centralized source of trusted and high-quality metadata. So let's now take a closer look at each piece of this journey, and starting with where DataCite metadata comes from. So research organizations register DOIs with DataCite, and this is one of the core services of DataCite membership available to those who join DataCite as direct members or as part of a consortium. And as Maria mentioned, our community of members is diverse and includes organizations from over 60 countries. These include universities and colleges, libraries, archives, and museums, research institutions, funders, and more. And so as part of DOI registration, research organizations map their local metadata to the DataCite metadata schema. Organizations have metadata for their research outputs and resources in their own systems, and these include various types of repositories or local catalogs. And so to register DOIs with DataCite, this metadata is mapped or crosswalked to the DataCite metadata schema. And because each repository crosswalks their metadata to the same schema, this enables standardized discovery across a global registry of research outputs and resources. And so the resulting metadata includes core metadata fields that are essential for citation. So that includes titles, creators, and dates, as well as different connection metadata fields that support different persistent identifier links. And so once they perform this metadata crosswalk, research organizations have several different options to share their metadata with DataCite. So many choose to build their own integrations using the DataCite REST API. And this allows for automated DOI registration and full customization of the metadata that they share. It's also quite common to use an existing integration from a registered service provider. And DataCite registered service providers, they maintain integrations with different software platforms, and this allows DataCite members to easily get set up with DOI registration. These integrations are with commonly used platforms, including DSpace, Dataverse, OJS, and others, and they allow varying degrees of customization. Another pathway is to use DataCite's web interface called DataCite Fabrica in order to register individual DOIs via a web form. And this manual option is best for small numbers of DOIs because it allows for users to register DOIs one by one. All three of these options support the creation of rich metadata and are used by research organizations throughout the world. So let's take a look now at what's in the DataCite metadata store. When organizations submit metadata as part of DOI registration, we store this metadata in our metadata store. And because they submit metadata in different formats, we apply some transformations to convert between XML and JSON and vice versa. Our processing also includes some small normalizations to support consistent formatting. Going forward, we're also working on developing an enrichments workflow, and this is to enable some more significant improvements to the metadata quality and usability, allowing us to apply modifications while also retaining the original submitted metadata. And Maria is going to share more about this enrichment workflow later in the presentation. So the DataCite metadata schema consists of 20 top-level metadata properties. And as Maria mentioned, this schema is developed and maintained by the DataCite Metadata Working Group in coordination with DataCite staff. Of the 20 properties, 6 are mandatory, while the others are recommended or optional. And the schema has a hierarchical structure, so many of the properties have some sub-properties to capture other important details. For example, the creator property shown here has sub-properties for the creator name, as well as for connecting identifiers. Here we can see the name identifier sub-property is used for the identifier of the creator. In this case, this is a person, a researcher who has an ORCID ID. And similarly, the sub-properties for affiliation and affiliation identifier are used to capture the researcher's institution and to include that institution's ROR ID. This chart shows the annual DOI registrations each year with the cumulative total DOIs superimposed. So you can see here that there's been rapid growth in the recent years, and particularly in the last 3. To date, the DataCite community has registered over 105 million DOIs as of today. And of these, over 33 million were registered just in 2025. And here we can see the distribution of the resource types for the DataCite DOIs as of last month. I think we pulled this data. So our control vocabulary for resource types has about 30 options, representing a wide range of research outputs and resources. And you can see here that while about half of our DOIs are for datasets, the other half are for many different resource types, from physical objects to images to awards to text-based resources. And so to show how our community is using these resource types, I want to share this short animation showing DataCite DOI registration over time, segmented by resource type. And so as this animation progresses, I hope you're seeing this on my screen. One thing you might notice is that some of the resource types appear in this list before they were added to the schema. And this is because repositories can and do update their metadata retroactively to take advantage of new resource types and new schema features, something we encourage to be making those continual updates. So here, yeah, you can see the release of schema 4. So the minor versions here. And coming up here, we're also going to see with the IGSN partnership, a growth in physical object DOIs, which will happen very quickly in about a moment. There we go, there's the physical objects. And then taking us up to the present day soon with schema 4.5 and 4.6 most recently, in the current state of the resource type distribution. All All right, so finally, I want to highlight one more feature of DataCite Metadata, which is that the DataCite Metadata store includes numerous connections to other persistent identifiers. And so as of earlier this month, over 35 million DOIs had at least one connection to an ORCID ID. And similarly, over 38 million had at least one connection to a ROR ID. These connections enable discovery and tracking of researchers' outputs and activities, and they also support institutional analyses of outputs and resources. So here's some examples of what these connections look like in practice. On the left, you can see part of my own ORCID record, where there are several works connected that have DataCite DOIs. So these DOIs included my ORCID ID in their DataCite DOI metadata, and this enabled them to be automatically added to my ORCID record. On the right, I've included an example of an organization view in DataCite Commons, and this shows works related to the California Digital Library, which are connected through the inclusion of CDL's ROR ID in the DataCite DOI metadata. These are both ways of bringing together works related to, on the left, an ORCID ID, on the right, a ROR ID, and seeing them in aggregate. And so that brings us to how DataCite metadata is reused for different applications. We know that research organizations harvest DataCite metadata for reuse, and that these downstream applications include discovery services, research information systems, national catalogs, and others that rely on DataCite for a centralized source of high-quality metadata. This is possible because DataCite metadata is openly available in the public domain under a CC0 waiver or public domain dedication. And under the framework of the principles of open scholarly infrastructure, the principle is that the data remains open and that any revenue-based models are based on services rather than the underlying data. And so this metadata can be accessed through several options for retrieval. The most commonly used option is the DataCite REST API, which enables both the creation and update of DataCite DOIs, as well as the retrieval of DataCite metadata records. For retrieval, the DOI's endpoint supports parameters to filter and sort the results, including a query parameter that allows you to search specific fields within the metadata record. As soon as an organization registers a new DOI or makes an update to an existing DOI's metadata, this is reflected almost immediately in the REST API. Another option for harvesting is our OAI PMH service, and this is the Open Archives Initiative protocol for metadata harvesting. With OAI PMH, you can request a specific format, and our service has two main formats. There's a Dublin core representation, which is pretty standard for OAI, and we also provide our XML record structured per the metadata schema via OAI PMH. OAI PMH also supports arbitrary queries, and so the same filtering that you can do with the REST API is also possible with our OAI PMH service. Also similar to the REST API, the OAI PMH service contains up-to-date information. The key difference here is the format. So you're retrieving XML records via OAI PMH instead of JSON, and also that this is a specific protocol, which is different from a RESTful API. And finally, we also have a public data file, and this contains DOI metadata records in JSON lines format. The public data file is released annually and contains all findable DataCite DOIs that were registered up to the end of the year. So our most recent public data file contains metadata for the 72 million DOIs that were registered up through the end of 2024. A key use case for the public data file is seeding metadata harvesting by providing every record at once to get you started. So instead of having to do individual requests with the REST API or page through results with OAI PMH, you can retrieve a single public data file to start your harvesting. After that, you can retrieve updates via the REST API at whatever frequency you choose. So through these different pathways, DataCite metadata is reused across discovery services and research information and monitoring services. You can explore some of the different services that harvest DataCite DOI metadata on our website, where we gather information about harvesters and their use cases and scope. We'll put the link for this page in the chat. And also, if you are responsible for a service that harvests DataCite metadata, please do let us know there's a form linked on that page, because we'd love to feature your service here too. And so just to close out my section, I'd like to show an example of the metadata journey in action. So here we can see a metadata record from GBIF. This is a data repository for global biodiversity data. GBIF registers DOIs with DataCite, and so they crosswalk their local repository metadata to the DataCite metadata schema. This metadata is accessible via our REST API, where you can see the record here in JSON format. And then using our REST API, metadata harvesters pick up DataCite DOIs that are in scope for their specific service. So here we can see how this metadata appears in OpenAlex, which recently started ingesting DataCite DOI metadata records for datasets and other resource types. So this example shows the flow of metadata from the local repository to DataCite and then to discovery services that make use of DataCite DOI metadata. And so now I'm going to turn things back over to Maria, who will cover how metadata enrichments can work with and complement this metadata journey.
Thanks so much, Kelly, for taking us on that journey and showing all of the different steps and opportunities and exciting points. So back to my slides here. I want to come back to this notion of enriching the value of DataCite metadata. So as we just saw in the journey that Kelly took us on, there's so much value in what's in the DataCite metadata store from the standpoint of what's able to be shared and described from all of the research organizations that are registering metadata with us. There's so much value in what's happening in the midpoint of the journey, the work that we're doing to establish connections, for example, to ROR IDs and to ORCID IDs, and also a lot of value in the downstream uses and integrations of DataCite metadata and discovery systems and other types of indexes and databases. And we've also heard from all of you in the Menti that we opened this session with that you're finding a lot of value in DataCite metadata already. And that's all great. Very, very happy to acknowledge that. But we also want to acknowledge that there's more work that could and should be done to make DataCite metadata even more valuable for all of those purposes and all of these ways that we've been talking about. So I wanted to bring the session full circle today to share a few examples of some of the themes and questions and considerations that are guiding our work as we move forward and try to enrich and enhance the value of DataCite metadata. And then we'll come back to a Menti to seek your feedback on this topic as well, and then open it up for some questions and further discussion. So one thing on that note, one theme that is really guiding our work and something that is very important to this work right now is recognizing that there is so much value already in what we have, but that there's also a lot of value in identifying what's missing or what could be better. So we've been doing a lot of analysis of what's in the metadata store right now, how people are using it, the kinds of needs and use cases that are being shared with us, and recognizing where we're still as a metadata provider, in a sense, kind of coming up short. And we want to be honest that there is more work to do, and this is work that we're doing with all of you to try to continue to make this this store of metadata more valuable for collective benefit. So this is really something that we see as a multifaceted and multilinear effort. We don't want to put all of the burden on the upstream depositors or contributors of metadata to send us perfect and complete metadata, to maintain it every day. For instance, we do rely upon those depositors and contributors to be good stewards of their metadata, but we also see opportunities to make that work easier for them and to alleviate some of that burden. So one thing that we've been actively working on this year, and hope to share more about soon is providing more tools to depositors and to members to help them analyze the completeness of their metadata, to identify opportunities for improvement. We're also exploring within DataCite tools and services, what we can do with our systems to enhance more of the normalizations that Kelly was talking about, to help our metadata be presented more consistently, while also respecting all of the original deposits that have come into our system. So the work that Kelly mentioned related to metadata enrichments is a big part of that right now. We've been exploring different ways of looking at individual use cases and also solutions at scale for interventions we might be able to make to support more consistent resource types, for instance, or I was seeing a question, which we'll get to, about subject areas and disciplinary classifications. So the point that I'm trying to make is that making DataCite metadata more valuable isn't just one thing. It's actually a constellation of different strategies that we are trying to implement at different points in that journey, and that we're trying to do that and aiming to do that with continued input from all of you, and looking at what we can leverage as far as collective efforts to achieve success at scale. DataCite metadata doesn't just exist in a vacuum, but it's part of this broader network of scholarly metadata and research infrastructure. And so one key example of what we're doing to align with community initiatives is participating in the COMET Collaborative Metadata Initiative to look at opportunities to enrich and to improve not just DataCite metadata, but scholarly metadata in general through community-driven approaches and leveraging machine learning technologies to achieve success at scale. So this is a key aspect of our work right now. We've actually been prototyping some initial approaches to how we might do that. I think there will be some links shared in the chat for people to take a peek and also offer some comments. So this is really a technical project that we're undertaking to improve DataCite metadata, and a community project in the sense that we are looking to align and to connect as much as possible with all of these different initiatives and activities that are out there, so that we're not duplicating efforts and so that we're aligning with where the community is going on this. So on that note, the call to action that I want to leave all of you with as ways that you can help to participate in those efforts, if you are not already, one simple thing is, if you are one of those who are contributing or registering metadata with DataCite, to help to keep it up to date, or if you need help doing that, get in touch with us and we can help you keep your metadata up to date. Second way that you can participate in this journey is to continue to share schema suggestions with us, and also to help us envision its future evolution. We saw in some of the comments at the beginning, people like the consistency of the schema. They like that it's broad and can support a number of resource types. They like that it's not too complex. We want the schema to be able to keep evolving without it becoming too unwieldy or complex. So your continued input on that is vitally important. And lastly, as I just mentioned, we are starting to explore and to prototype different approaches at scale to enrich and to improve our metadata store and to align with community initiatives like COMET. So please share your input and ideas with us so that we can make sure that as we move forward and take those next steps, that all of those considerations are taken into account. So that is the call to action on the one hand for how you can continue to participate in this journey with us. And I'm going to leave you with that, and also invite you to join us for another brief poll to share a little bit of your feedback right now about things that you would like us to consider, or things that you would like to see as we move forward. So the Menti should be back up And I'm going to go to the next question. And we'd like to hear from all of you if there's anything on your mind that you want to share right now about what could make DataCite metadata more valuable for you or your use case. And this should be the same Menti link that we shared before. Great to see some initial responses coming in. Seeing one theme about integrations and mappings and crosswalks to other schemas and how we can strengthen that. Another theme on funding related metadata. Resource type consistency is, I think, something that would be valuable for a lot of purposes. And we'll give this another 30 seconds or so if you have other thoughts. And if you'd like to expand on any of these, you're welcome to share further thoughts in the chat. Okay, thank you for these suggestions. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is kind of related, but are there specific tools or guidance if you are registering or maintaining DataCite DOIs? What would make this easier for you if you have specific tools or guidance that you would find particularly useful? And then the next question is going to be similar, but will be focused on retrieving and consuming DataCite DOI metadata. This one is just focused on kind of upstream registration and deposits. Seeing some initial suggestions here, kind of a combination of technical support and also guidance and documentation. It's really helpful. cheat sheets and examples, tutorials for multilingual support. Okay, another 20 seconds or so for some final suggestions here. Again, if you think of any suggestions after we change the slide, we still want to know about them, so you can share them with us after. Okay, thank you for these. So on the next slide, as I mentioned, this is a similar question, but from the standpoint of retrieving or analyzing DataCite metadata. Are there specific tools or guidance that would make this easier for you? I will also note, while people are thinking of this, we do have a very excellent support site with specific documentation on constructing API queries. We also have some documentation oriented at harvesters about different harvesting methods that can be used to retrieve all or certain subsets of DataCite metadata. So we'll make sure that the link to those support docs are shared in case people need them. Okay, seeing some suggestions come in, community use cases and harvesting and analyzing DataCite metadata. It's a great suggestion. When we did the DataCite annual meeting last year, we actually had a roundtable with 3 different harvesters presenting their use cases. So we might be able to quickly dig up that video link and share it in the chat. But it sounds like learning more about how metadata is being harvested continues to be a useful topic. And I'm seeing this comment about OpenAIRE. OpenAIRE was actually one of those panelists on the Harvester Roundtable. Okay, so I want to make sure we leave some time for Q&A. So if you have any final suggestions here, please drop them in. And otherwise, if you think of anything afterwards, please let us know. And we really appreciate everybody sharing their thoughts. So going back to a little bit of Q&A here in the remaining time that we have, I'm going to take a quick look at what's come in. And maybe we'll see what we want to start with. I see some questions have been answered already in writing. I can take the one about OpenAlex, which we briefly touched on. This question from Bassem, thank you. about progress in the integration of DataCite metadata with open and non-proprietary databases like OpenAlex. Is DataCite metadata being harvested? The quick answer is yes. We actually announced this a few weeks ago and did a webinar with OpenAlex last week to talk through the integration. They are currently harvesting almost 100% of DataCite metadata. I think they have close to 100 million DOIs from DataCite out of the 105 or 106 million in DataCite right now. And they will be continuing to harvest going forwards. We'll share the links to those OpenAlex resources in the chat. I will note that they are still working on the integration and refining it and helping to make it easier for users who want to find certain things from DataCite in the OpenAlex system. So it's a great time to explore it and ask questions, but also important to understand that they're developing very rapidly right now and continuing to make improvements. So keep a close eye on it. If something doesn't seem totally perfect, it's probably because they're just ironing it out and will improve it soon. And as part of that work with OpenAlex and with other integrators, we do make concerted efforts to ensure that they're taking advantage of the schema and being able to take advantage of new resource types, for instance. I know that in the last version of the schema that we released, we included a resource type for awards to be able to support DOIs for grants and awards. OpenAlex is still working on how all of the DataCite award DOIs currently are going to be represented in their system because they do some enrichments on their end. So, but my point is that we're actively in consultation with these integrators and harvesters to help make sure that they're finding what they need in DataCite and able to keep up with the latest changes. So thank you for your question. Okay, I guess, Kelly, are you able to take the one about OJS and Invenio?
Yeah, I can. So thanks for the question. Are there any ongoing efforts to align and coordinate the integration of DUI registration with DataCite in open source platforms like OJS or Invenio RDM, particularly to ensure compatibility with the latest version of the DataCite metadata schema? The short answer is yes, and ongoing collaboration with these platforms happens through our Registered Service Providers program. And so for OJS and Invenio RDM, both are participants in that program and they're registered service providers. And so we're in close contact with their developers on schema updates and ensuring that those platforms reflect the latest updates that are relevant to their user communities.
Great, thank you, Kelly. I can briefly touch on Irina's question, and then I think we can bring it to a close unless there's anything else. I might actually punt the mandatory question back to Kelly and the metadata working group, but I will acknowledge this question about subject metadata. We know is a tricky one. We know there's a lot of interest among members and consumers in terms of DataCite metadata and making that subject metadata more useful. This is actually one of the areas of work that we've been consulting on with the COMET initiative, looking at different opportunities for improving subject area normalizations. The long and the short of it is that it is very important, but also very complicated. And so it's an important area that needs attention, but we don't have a concrete solution yet. And Kelly, do you want to take the mandatory question?
Sure, yeah. So there are not currently plans to make the subject field mandatory. Of course, it is recommended and highly encouraged. And I was going to try to give you an answer on like what proportion of DOIs currently have subjects. Just being a little bit slow at the moment, but I think in general with our approach to these is that we want to keep the required fields minimal and what's necessary for a citation, and then to work with integrators to kind of make it easier to add all of the recommended and optional fields. And so for subject, actually we have almost 3/4 of our DOIs have subject metadata, and that's without it being mandatory currently. And of course, it's something we're trying to keep bringing up. But that's kind of the current state of subject coverage with the existing schema.
Great, thanks, Kelly, and especially great to get those up to the minute stats. And thank you, Irina, for your question. So I'm going to bring the session to a close and thank all of you for your questions. Thank you for your feedback, and again, invite you to stay more involved. We have a DataCite mailing list, which you're probably on, but in case you're not, make sure that you are signed up. We're putting the link in the chat. We're also in the middle of running our annual community survey. This is for members and also non-members to share their thoughts about what's working well, what you want to see more of, less of, etc. So the survey is open until December 1st. We really want to hear from you. It should only take a few minutes to respond, and we look at every single response and take it very seriously. So we really do want to hear from all of you, even if you think you don't have much to say. Please take a moment to look at it. And thank you in advance. So on that note, really happy to do this session with all of you. Great to see all this interest in the topic, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and continuing the journey.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.